right? Always remember that if you are fortunate enough to be in a position of authority, that you have but a temporary possessory interest in it. My sixth piece of advice is from my body guy. So everybody who's a governor, or, obviously the president, and people who have Secret Service and Michigan's or state detail, etc. They always have a body guy. And the body guy is usually, or in my case, it was always a body guy, but there's body women too. And they always carry the schedule. They make sure you're in and out on time. I'm sure that some of you worked on campaigns, have maybe been this person. But Jerome Marks was my body guy. And Jerome was, and is, just the salt of the earth. And whenever we would come to a big event, at one of the, conference centers and whatever, he would always make sure that I came in the back way, through the kitchen, and that I stopped and saw the janitor, and saw the waiter, the waitresses, saw the security guard, saw the people who were not seen. And he would say to me that as long as I'm with you, Gov, I want to make sure that you see the people you lead, because you cannot lead them if you do not see them. Jerome was key in making sure that I didn't lose my soul. I will continue to breathe oxygen into your soul, Governor, as long as I'm with you. If as you put your teams together and you are leading, if you don't have people on your team who see people and who make sure that you see people, then you will have really missed an opportunity. There's a South African expression, which is a greeting. It's called sawubona. It literally means, I see you. And the response is, I am here. Sikona, Sikona, I am here. You have to be able to see people and see their pain. So there is this great leadership book called The Leadership Challenge, and it's written by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. And in this is my seventh piece of advice. In this book, they say, name any great leader, athlete, activist, performer, citizen. Chances are the crucible of their crowning achievement was some distressing crisis, some wrenching change, tragic misfortune, or risky venture. Only challenge produces the opportunity for greatness. Only challenge. So for those of you who are contemplating leading, I want to share with you a challenge of mine, a failure of mine. It stems from my first year in office as governor. In 2003, I took office, and we were just coming out of a national recession. George Bush was president, and my advisors, and at the beginning of every year, there are economists who come to the Capitol to tell you what the economy is going to be like for the year ahead so that you can base your budget on it, right? So the economists came to the Capitol, and they all said, great, we're just coming out of a national recession. As we emerge from a national recession, because Michigan makes cars, nobody has been buying these big consumer products while we were in recession. But once we come out of recession, there's pent-up demand. There's going to be a lot of demand for cars. That means our employment is going to go up. And my advisors were saying, you'll get credit for all those jobs that will be created. Great timing. So at the end of my first year in office, despite the forecasts of the economists, we weren't creating jobs hand over fist. And I get a call from the guy who's the head of our Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is the entity that partners with businesses in order to make them stay in Michigan, grow in Michigan, etc. And he says, God, we got a major problem. And I said, what? He said, we have a little tiny town, Greenville, Michigan. You all have Greenville. I said, you all. I told you guys, I absorbed the accent wherever I am. But we have a Greenville too, right in the middle of the state. 8,000 people live in Greenville. And he said, Greenville is about to lose their big employer. It is a refrigerator factory. And I said, well, how many people in this town of 8,000 work at the refrigerator factory? And he said, almost 3,000. In fact, if you can imagine with grandchildren and grandparents, this is like a one-company town. In fact, Greenville, you know Greenville, right? So Greenville called themselves the refrigerator capital of North America because, in fact, this refrigerator factory, operated by Electrolux, was the largest refrigerator factory in North America. This little tiny town. So anyway, he tells me this, and I say, what, they're about to go to Mexico? No way is that going to happen on my watch. First year as governor, I'm going to get my cabinet, we're going to go to Greenville, and we'll just make them an offer they can't refuse. Not like a Chris Christie offer. But we're going to put incentives on the table or try to get them, right? So I did. Brought the whole cabinet to Greenville. Anybody who had something that they could offer. And in fact, we went to the Greenville City Hall, which was, about the size of maybe this. No, it was like this. It was a very small city hall, but there was this big square table, and we all sat around it. And the mayor was there, and the city manager was there, and the head of the UAW, who represented the workers, were there, and the head of the Montcalm Community College. All of these people who had something to offer were there in the room. And we all sort of basically, we emptied our pockets of chips, and we made a big pile. We slid our chips across the table to the management of Electrolux, and in this pile of chips were things like 0 taxes for 20 years, state and local, or that we would help to build them a new factory because the factory was starting to crumble, or the UAW offered such a huge amount of concessions that they didn't want anyone to know how much they were offering because they just wanted to keep these jobs here. The community college was going to retrain all the workers. We had a huge package. So Electrolux, who's in the room, they take actually a list of incentives. They take our list of incentives and they go outside the room for 17 minutes. And they come back in and they say, wow, this is the most generous any community has ever been in trying to keep jobs. But there's nothing you can do to compensate for the fact that we can pay $1.57 an hour in Juarez, Mexico. And so we're going to go. I see a few of you nodding because you've seen this story play out before in various ways in communities across the country, and you've seen it here in North Carolina. When they said to me, there is nothing you can do, I'm like, wait, this is one community in a state that overwhelmingly is tied to manufacturing. What is this going to mean here and for other communities? I was obsessed with this there's nothing you can do line. And on the month that the last refrigerator came off the assembly line in Greenville, the employees had this gathering at a big pavilion called Clackle's Orchard Pavilion. And it was like a big community wake, and they called it, this gathering, the Last Supper. And I went to this gathering, even though I wasn't invited, because I couldn't save their jobs, right? But I went because I was so obsessed with this. And I go into the room, it's this big indoor pavilion, and there's, hundreds, 1,000 people in there eating off of 8-top tables out of box lunches, plaid tabletops. There was a sad band playing, a band playing sad music, probably a sad band. And I go up to the first table, and this guy stands up, and he's got his tiger's cap on backwards, and he's got his tattoos, and he says, he pulls his 2 daughters up next to him, and he says, Gov, he says, I want you to meet my girls. He said, I have worked at this factory for 30 years. He says, I'm 48 years old. I went from high school to factory. He said, my father worked at this factory. My grandfather worked at this factory. All I know, he said, is how to make refrigerators. And then he looks at his girls and he puts his hand on his chest like this. And he says, so Gov, tell me, who is ever gonna hire me? Who is ever gonna hire me? And that question was asked by everyone at those tables that day. And by everyone in one of the 62,000 communities across this country that lost jobs in the first decade of this century. I am obsessed with this question about how we can create advanced manufacturing jobs in America in a global economy. I'm obsessed with the hollowing out of the middle class. And the reason why I tell you this story after I read you this quote from Kouzes and Posner is because for me this was my tipping point, wrenching challenge. I didn't achieve greatness, but I can tell you I achieved obsession. Did any of you read George W. Bush's biography, Decision Points? Did anyone read that? One person. What is the matter with you people? Well, in this, I don't know if you remember, he tells the story about what he would ask the other world leaders as icebreaker questions. And what he asked Hu Jintao, then head of China, what he asked him was, and what he asked everybody was, what keeps you up at night? That was sort of his icebreaker. Of course, what kept him up at night was the fear of terrorism. And what Hu Jintao said was very interesting. He said, what keeps me up at night is creating 25 million jobs a year for my people. I want leaders who are kept up at night over this, right? I want people who are like obsessed, who are losing sleep over how we can create jobs in America. This is my obsession. But if I hadn't been in Greenville, if I hadn't seen the faces of Greenville, and that was the start of a whole line, I could give you a series of stories, but I wouldn't have that obsession. It's one of the reasons why now I've done this American Jobs project at UC Berkeley, which is how we can create good-paying, advanced energy, middle-class jobs in America in a global economy. I'm totally obsessed with it. But my advice is really for all of us to fear not putting ourselves in a position to see others' pain in order to take action to help the rest. Fear not being in a position to see others' pain. Nancy Pelosi describes having visited and this is the last piece of advice, and we'll be able to open it up for questions, but having visited a bishop in South Africa. And on the wall of the bishop's office was a saying, a prayer. And it went like this. It said, when at last I stand before the face of God, God will say to me, show me your wounds. And if I have no wounds, God will ask, was there nothing worth fighting for? It is September 14th, 2015. 50 years from today, on September 14th, 2065. Some of us won't be here. I plan on being here, but some of you all will. But a lot of you will, and your children will, and maybe your grandchildren will. And the question is, what are the scars that you will have earned on their behalf? On behalf of the battles you have waged for people and causes worth fighting for. May you be scarred. Thank you. Leadership or politics or what is really bugging you or Dean Bierman, whatever you'd like. Right? So any questions or thoughts? I have a, oh, have you got a mic? Oh, I can go back up here then. I'll let you do your job. Let me just say, as you guys are thinking about this, I was asking these young leaders who are interspersed in the audience about their Myers-Briggs test. You guys of you who weren't in this group, you know, Myers-Briggs, of course, for those of you who don't know, is this personality sort, essentially. And I so strongly believe in this. It was so helpful to me in my marriage. I am not kidding you. My husband teaches leadership also, and Dan, my husband, is an INFP. For any of you who knows what that is, he's a feeler. He's open-ended. He is an introvert. He's just, and I'm an ENTJ. I am like, we are going to close this out. We are going to move forward. We're going to make the list. We're going to check it off. And so knowing who's on your team and filling out a team to soar with your strengths is a really, really great thing. Now, what made me think of that? I'm not sure. I was looking at you, and I'm not sure about Myers-Briggs and how important it is as a leadership lesson. Anyway, any questions, you guys, or anything that's on your chest that you want to, any one of the leading students?
So I'm curious, advanced manufacturing is clearly the wave of the future, and it
From
is...
your mouth to God's ears.
Well, no, but in our area here, it's critical if we're going to get textiles or anything, but advanced manufacturing does not include a lot of workers. Right. So how do you create the jobs? I understand advanced manufacturing and bring that wealth back here, but how do you create jobs with it?
Right, so that you are aware of what we're doing in